Hey guys, welcome back to Musings of Mavri, where I'm your host Mavri, and today we're going to be looking at Kotobuki Episode 3. So, last episode we started to get a little bit of the world setting as explained by Madame Julia, I believe, and her dialogue with the first officer. So we got to know a little bit about the political situation and the world setting that this anime is currently set in. Now, they didn't really explain it properly, which was part of my complaint of the last episode, but I expect them to continue to expand on that in this episode and maybe in future episodes as well. Now, my money right now is still on that it's sort of like an alternate history version of our world, so maybe World War II, but not really World War II. And so the places that we can see, the towns, probably at one time these were prosperous and they were governed by a central government, but for some reason right now it's each city or town, city state for itself, and there are other kinds of alliances springing up. So this was a gradual devolve into lawlessness and desperados, etc., etc. And that is why we now have these transport fleets, which are companies, and then they also hire these flying squadrons as protection. So let's see in this episode whether we will touch on that a little bit more or not. Also, 3 episodes in, I think it's about time we get to learn of the main plot, if there is going to be one. It could also go the route where it's basically enemy of the week, and so we just basically have different events each week until maybe a final arc, conclusion arc consisting of 3 or 4 episodes. That's also a possibility. Hopefully, it's not like that though, and they actually have some concept of a overarching story within them. So, anyways, that's enough talk. Let's get into the episode and see what it has to offer. So, let us begin in 3, 2, 1, play. Okay. I guess some fan service first. Oh, that's what we saw last episode. Alright. As usual, we'll be skipping the opening, so I'll see you guys in just a second. And we are back. Bahama's longest day. Vigilant force. No. And another raid right now. A 5? Alright. Wait, these planes Aren't they Western? As I said before, I don't really know any Japanese planes other than the Hayabusa and Zero. But this... Wait, so you came here, you burned down their warehouse, and now you want to do business? For one aircraft? The Yufeng. By the way, last episode they were saying that the Yufeng were the industrial group behind the planes. So that's an alternate history because in the real world, these planes were made by Kawasaki, Mitsubishi, etc., etc. Some others. Not this Yufeng industry. Seriously? Yeah, that was stupid. Raiden. That means lightning. Yeah, I have the same question. It's just a fighter plane. "11 Type 97. They're only 6 though. 6 versus 40? Ugh. Alright. So what are you gonna do? Direct democracy? True. So like the mafia or something. Organized crime. I take it that's what happened to your family? Oh? Yeah. Don't give in to terrorism. World War One World War One planes? Alright. I mean, I assume those are World War One planes. Like I said, I really wish the sound levels could be a little bit higher for things like the engine sounds. How much is turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? HR department? Sales team? Alright, whatever you say. Oh. Alright. Nice. A reverse hostage situation. That's funny. Okay. That was a fairly unrealistic explosion, but alright. Okay, nice break off. The other one should be looping back in on this guy's back right now. Where's this wingman? What? That made no sense. From below? Or from above? Oh, so those are type 3s? Alright, never mind. Nosedive? Alright, loop around. This is relatively bloodless, considering. Oh, is the mayor going to fly too? Okay. That was an interesting maneuver. Nice. Seriously? Alright, that was a nice trap. Oh, what? Dang. Eject. Whoa. Okay. Come on, you should have checked, right? Wait, these girls don't have parachutes? Alright. Yeah, but how are they gonna capture them? Whoa! Mid-air capture? Alright. So you lost like 6, 7 planes and pilots to get one plane? Okay. Oh, so that's the mission now? Alright. Okay. Let me just skip this ending first. And then I'll see you guys at the preview. Alright, let's see if there's a preview. I quite like this song, by the way. It's a nice little soothing song. Oh, they're making a raid on the elite stronghold? Okay. Okay. That's it? Alright, I'll see you guys in just a second. Alrighty, so that was episode 3 of Kotobuki. And we didn't really get much in terms of main plot or world setting in this episode, but we did get another full-scale battle, and I have to say this one was, at least for me, more interesting than the one in the last episode. Now, before we get into that, let's make sure we know all of the planes that were flown within this episode first. Let's start with the self-defense force of Rahama. I'm not gonna call them the vigilantes because, frankly, vigilantes should mean that they are taking this self-defense task or this, justice on themselves, and they're not really appointed by the an official government or an official power, if you will. But judging from what happened within this episode, I'd say that they worked pretty closely with the local authorities. So, are they vigilantes? Not really, but I'm just gonna call them self-defense force to alleviate any misunderstandings. Besides, that's what they're called in Japanese anyways. So the self-defense force basically flew the Type 97 fighters. The Type 97 fighter is sort of like the predecessor to the Hayabusas, which our girls are flying currently. So maybe one level before, so they're using a bit more antique technology. And the reconnaissance planes that they used were actually the Type 95 trainers, at least if I see correctly. I judged it by the unequal wingspan. If you go back and look, it's the top wingspan is longer than the lower wingspan. So I think it fits the description of the Type 95 trainer pretty well. So basically they're using some stuff that are really, both the Type 97 fighter and the Type 95 trainer, I'd say, are more pre-World War II era planes. Maybe sometime during the sort of like the invasion of China during that period of time, and were pretty much made obsolete very quickly by the start of the official World War II. If we're going by 1939, or in Japan's case, I think 1937 was when they invaded. I'm not completely sure, but anyways, it was definitely late 30s and not into. It was definitely not 40s type of plane. So they were flying some more older stuff. The pirates or elite industries, on the other hand, I was kind of confused because they mentioned a Type 3 in the translations, and I was like, no, wait a minute, those aren't Heians, right? Those aren't the Type 3s that we saw last episode. So I think what they're saying is actually the Mark 3, of the Hayabusas. So the Mark 3, so basically they're the same plane as the Hayabusa, except that they are two variants, or I guess two official variants, more advanced. So typically, I believe the Hayabusa went up to Mark 4. Don't quote me on that, but definitely up to Mark 3 at least. And so each version added some more improvements, some better horsepower, better engines, maybe a little bit more armor, some upgraded electronics, and stuff like that. So definitely an upgrade over the normal Hayabusas, which our girls are flying, which I believe are Mark 1s, but still not as big a technology gap as last episode, where we had Hayabusas versus Type 3 fighters, right? Versus the Heians, which were way superior to the Hayabusas. And then also, the focal point of this episode is the Raiden, right? Raiden means lightning, as I mentioned in the episode. It's a little bit different designation from all the other planes that we have been introduced to so far. You could kind of say that it's the cousin of the Zero, the famous Zero. But they operate on two completely different philosophies. Whereas the Zero goes with the doctrine of high maneuverability, low armor, low power. The Raiden is more of a Western philosophy, if you will. So they sacrifice maneuverability for high altitude, high speed, high power, and it made sense because they were generally tasked with defending the Japanese mainland against bombers, such as the B-29s, which were used to bomb Japan. So that was that. But even so, it's not exactly like the most technological advanced plane that Japan had during World War II. There were still others that were better than the Raidens. So I'm kind of curious why all this effort and hassle just to get that one plane. Like, seriously, the elite industries, dude, lost at least 10 planes and pilots just to get this one, to me, insignificant plane. So definitely we'll be looking forward to next episode to see what exactly the gist is and why they want this plane so badly. So yeah, that was a quick overview of the planes that they were flying. I couldn't quite identify what the plane that the CEO was flying. It seemed to be some sort of variant. I'm sure I could look it up if I had enough time, but I'm a little bit lazy. So if anybody can identify that one for me, much appreciated. And I actually wanted to keep on talking about what I did like within this episode, especially in regards to the actual fighting. So this one, we actually saw a little bit more of both the formation tactics and the dogfighting tactics within this episode. So talking about formation tactics first, originally I was a bit worried because the self-defense force of Rahama, they didn't seem to utilize it very well. You saw one scene where they had the lead, they had the wingman, and then when they were chased by the planes from Elite Industries, they broke off in different directions, right? So typically, what this means is that um, if both planes follow the same plane, the other plane is supposed to loop around and then act as sort of the covering fire to shake these guys off the lead man's tail. But that didn't really happen with the self-defense force. However, with Kairi and Emma, this did happen. So Kairi was sort of like the bait, right? And then she later pulled a. So there was one scene where she was being chased, and then she pulled a. I believe it's called an air stop or something, or air brake, where basically you completely stop and then just lose speed deliberately to let the other plane pass through, and then you lose altitude to gain back your speed and then come back up again. And then whereas her wingman, which was Emma in this case, looped around and then was in prime position to shoot down the enemy planes. So that one I dig very much because finally we got to see some wingman tactics, which I felt were a little bit lacking in the last episode. And not only that, but we also got some more dogfighting tactics as well. Actually, on both sides, actually. There's one scene in particular where Kate went into a dive, right? And she had this enemy Elite Industries plane following her. So Kate did a more, I guess, Hollywood style maneuver where she went like completely down and then completely upside down and pulled a hard G-force and then came back up. I'm assuming that's probably possible within the capabilities of the Hayabusa. Definitely something that's not easily attempted. The enemy, on the other hand, did something more of an orthodox strategy where he pulled into a roll and then used the momentum and the changing the what's it called? I forgot what force that was. Is it the what force is that? Anyways, he pulled the barrel roll so to better position himself to follow the dive and while still maintaining full control, right? So one was a little bit more flashy, more Hollywood, and then the other one used a more conventional style method to follow through. Now, of course, later on, Kate completely pulled out of it, and used another roll to get back behind the enemy and shoot the enemy down. So, I guess, hey, they're aces, they're great fighters, they're great dog fighters. So, I guess maybe it could happen. But anyways, I was a little bit pleased to find that they were using a bit more advanced dogfighting tactics than we saw last episode, where last episode it was generally just going into a turn and then the other plane following it, right? Even though one of the planes, the Type 3s, were clearly better than the Type 1s that the girls are flying, but they chose to show them use similar moves, similar maneuverability, which to me didn't really make sense. This one I loved a lot more, since it showed the complexity and depth of dogfighting. And speaking of which, so this one was again a very much dominated battle by the girls, even though the enemy had superior numbers, right? So if we're talking all the planes added together, the self-defense force plus the girls maybe had between them, I guess, 12 to 16 planes, whereas the enemy had close to 40 planes. However, compared to last episode, where they were not only fighting a number superiority, but also technology superiority, this one, even though the Hayabusas that the enemy are flying are Mark III, they're still at least similar in capability to the Mark Is that the girls are flying, so it's a little bit more believable this way. And also, they had covering fire from the ground, and yeah, speaking of which, there was this one tactic where they, basically flew into anti-air batteries and then did a hard turn to let the anti-air batteries do their work. I thought that was a nice little move as well, and didn't really see the how much camouflage the anti-air batteries had, but I'm assuming at that distance, or maybe the sun or something, so they couldn't notice. That's acceptable to me. That's acceptable. So combined with the smaller gap between the technologies and the support of the ground fire, I think this victory to me is a lot more believable and reasonable than the last episode. So definitely props to them here. I felt this was a better executed battle overall, both in terms of realism and also in terms of its its complexity. Sorry, its complexity. So good stuff there. Good stuff. What else is there to talk about? Not really much to say about the main plot. Again, we didn't really understand more about how the world works. Apparently, next episode they're going to try and get the Raiden back. Just what is the significance of that plane, I still don't know, but I guess we'll see next episode. And maybe learn a little bit more about these kind of pirates in general. So, yeah, that about covers my review of this episode. Let me know if I missed anything. What do you guys think? And I'll see you guys next time.